Good evening. I'm Joe Sawyer, the Superintendent of the Shrewsbury Public Schools. This evening, Thursday, March 26, 2020, I'm recording this short video here at the Shrewsbury Media Connection, thanks to Mark Serra, the Executive Director of SMC, in order to provide Shrewsbury families, community members, and school district colleagues with a short update regarding our school district's response to the coronavirus pandemic. First off, most importantly, I hope you and your family remain healthy. This is an extraordinary time in the history of our country and the world. It is affecting us right here in our hometown of Shrewsbury. And of course, our greatest wish is that everyone remains healthy while we deal with this pandemic. I want to also speak for all educators that we miss students very much. We certainly appreciate the seriousness with which the vast majority of our students and their families are taking social distancing during this unprecedented health emergency. That's really important to help keep our community as safe as possible during this very challenging time. But we certainly miss our students. We wish we were in school, and it's something that really has been a real challenge for everyone. We know that it's been more challenging for some than others. Many families have been turned upside down. I want to personally thank the many Shrewsbury families who have medical professionals who are dealing with this on the front lines, first responders. It's something that takes an entire community effort. And we recognize the stress and the toll that this is taking on many, many families within our community in different ways. As most of you know, Governor Charlie Baker extended the school closure until May 4th. This was an understandable decision on the part of Governor Baker, but it certainly wasn't necessarily unexpected given the way that the pandemic has been growing over the course of the last few weeks. It's of course disappointing that we won't be back together in school until that time at the soonest, and we're hopeful that we can, as they say, flatten the curve and be back in business with students in classrooms on May 4th. The most important thing since the school closure began a number of days ago is to focus, of course, on the health and the well-being of our students. We took immediate action to make sure that our families that are faced with food insecurity would have access to meals. We have many students, of course, that rely on our school district for their meals day to day, whether that's for breakfast or for lunch. We have been delivering meals to families, either families coming to the Shrewsbury High School campus on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays to receive meals for part of the week. We've been able to deliver a number of meals to families that just don't have transportation access. That's something that's really important. We've also provided information about our wonderful community partner, St. Anne's Human Services, right on Route 9, across from the Trader Joe's Plaza. There is a food pantry there, and any family that needs assistance should feel free to call St. Anne's or come to the food pantry there and thrift shop if you're in need. And so the first and foremost, we want to make sure we're taking care of our families and our kids, especially when it comes to them being able to get meals, and we're very happy we've been able to do that. We also, over the last couple of days, have been surveying families because during this time where we're trying to connect with families remotely over the internet, we know that there's a number of families in our community that either don't have internet access or don't have a device, particularly for our younger students. Many of you know that our middle and high school students each have an iPad as part of their educational program, but that's something we're working on for families who may need a device as we move into a more robust phase of remote learning. So we're really trying to make sure we're taking care of our families. And over the course of the last couple of weeks up until this point, we have been following guidance that we were given by the United States Department of Education, the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education here in Massachusetts, the Office of Civil Rights, regarding what was expected during this unexpected school closure over the last couple of weeks. We followed the guidance we were given, and we've been providing opportunities for students remotely, for enrichment work, for things that are optional that can help them keep up with their studies. Our educators are connecting with our children each day, whether that's by email or through our Schoology platform. And I do appreciate the feedback I've received from many families, appreciating how teachers have been reaching out and connecting with those families, which is really reassuring for our students as well as our parents. We are ready now at this point because we did receive some updated guidance just earlier this afternoon from the Commissioner Jeff Riley of the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education that with the LinkedIn school closure, the shift to a more robust approach to remote learning is able to begin. We've been working behind the scenes to do that, and we will be making a shift effective this coming Monday, March 30th. And that shift will be phasing in over the course of starting Monday and over the coming days after that. We are working really hard to do some really complex work behind the scenes. I know that our educators have been doing some wonderful things already, and they're poised to do more. We also understand that different families are in very different places, whether those are the families of our students or those are the families of our educators. I do appreciate that many of you have emailed me with very different perspectives. And I ask for your grace and patience because of the overwhelming amount of communications that we've been receiving. I've not been able to return individual emails at the rate that I would like. But please know that I'm trying to read everything that comes into my inbox. And there really have been a variety of opinions that have been shared with me. Some families are sharing that they're very concerned because of the amount of what is happening in their home under the stay-at-home advisory, people working from home remotely, sometimes for the first time or for the first time with their family present, multiple children or perhaps a spouse who is working out in the medical community or on the front lines in some other way. That it's been very difficult even to keep up with the optional work that we've been providing. Other families have been emailing me wanting for something more, looking for more opportunities for students to begin learning new material and shifting to more of an online schooling model. And that is something that we are going to start phasing into beginning Monday. I certainly appreciate the feedback we've received from families, understand those concerns, and understand some of you are upset at this point about the way this has been handled. I can assure you that we're doing our best to work within the legal guidelines we've been provided, and at the same time work to make sure kids have something to do at home as they are able. But we are going to be moving into a more robust phase of online learning. And what I'd like to share with you this evening is the work we've been doing behind the scenes in terms of making this shift and what those goals and guiding principles will be. Let me share first with you the goals that are evolving as far as how we're approaching remote learning. First and foremost is keeping our students connected to the educators who care about them and their classmates in ways that enhance their well-being. We are really very hopeful that we're able to make sure that as we have this prolonged period where kids are not having those connections at school that they rely upon, we want to be sure that we're finding ways to connect. And that is something that we will continue to figure out ways to do as effectively as we possibly can because we know this is a trying time for everyone, including our young people. Secondly, we're going to be looking at engaging students in distance learning with really 3 areas of focus. First, providing supports to help all students learn at home. We know that, as I mentioned earlier, we have some families who have some issues with connectivity, and we're working to solve those problems and working with them. We also know that we have family dynamics that are very different depending on the situation right now. And depending on how the pandemic evolves, we know we may also be dealing with families who are dealing with illness within their home. Regardless, and we know that we also have many students who have different challenges that they rely on school for to help them with. That could be students who have different kinds of special learning needs or different kinds of disabilities with whom we work. It also means students who we're teaching English to because they've recently come to our country, and our responsibility is to help them learn English as quickly as possible. But our commitment is to make sure we're trying to provide supports to help all of our children learn as best as they can. No matter what we do, we're not going to be able to replicate the kind of experience kids have when school is in session. But please know that we are going to do our absolute best to connect with as many students as we possibly can, as skillfully as we possibly can. Second, our responsibility is to maintain and develop key academic and critical thinking skills. While we've been focusing on optional activities to reinforce the kind of material that's already been taught, and we'll continue to reinforce the most critical kinds of things to avoid students regressing from the learning they've already done, we will also begin to introduce new content in the coming days and weeks, and we also will be requiring students to complete assignments. Instead of things being optional, we're going to move into a more required type of learning model to the greatest extent in the ability that families are able to manage that given their situation. But we want to develop those key academic and critical thinking skills, and we also want to help students learn important academic content as much as we can. So to meet those goals, we've developed a set of guiding principles that we've been sharing with our staff and getting feedback on. First off is to maximize access. As I mentioned earlier, we're going to do everything we possibly can to provide learning opportunities and to support all of our students, using all the available personnel that we have and every resource we can possibly muster that we can utilize in a remote way when we're not in session. Secondly, we want to make sure we're creating consistency. We're developing a clear set of guidelines, not only for our educators' remote work, but also so that students and families know what to expect, so we can provide consistent experiences across the board that people know that what's expected of them. We also want to empower our educators. I could not be more proud of the quality of the educators we have in the Shrewsbury Public Schools. They do phenomenal work, they're dedicated to their students, and we want to make sure within the guidelines that we establish, we're empowering them to determine ways in which to best achieve these educational goals that we're creating. So we want to empower our educators to do the best job they can connecting with kids. Again, with the understanding that our educators are in different places depending on their own home situations during this national emergency. We also want to provide structure and predictability. We want to establish schedules that provide clarity for students, parents, and educators, some of which will be suggested, and some of them which will actually be times we'll want to connect with kids in real time. We're working on ways to best do that, ironing out issues relative to privacy, relative to the kind of technology tools that we can use effectively and that work for students as well as educators. But we do want to provide some real-time connections. We want to make sure that we're figuring out the best way to use those tools. We've been experimenting with those over the last couple of weeks, and I'm confident we'll be able to make that work in a variety of ways. For our middle and high school students, we have a learning platform called Schoology that already is very effective for these kinds of things, and we're working really hard to figure out how we can extend that opportunity for families and students through the elementary grades. So look for some information to come on that. But much of what we'll ask students to do will be done asynchronously or not exactly live with their teachers, but there will be some opportunities to interact with our educators in a live way in the coming time as we develop this. We also want to focus on what's essential. Learning that's most essential will be the focus of instruction. What we know from what's best practice in terms of remote learning, there is not really any way feasible that we're going to be able to deliver the amount of education for skills and content that we could if we were in session. By a rule of thumb, it's probably reasonable to expect no more than 50% of the amount of coverage of curriculum content can be achieved in this kind of situation. So we're going to really be focusing on what's most important and be reasonable what can be completed under the circumstances while keeping kids engaged with their learning at home. In doing that, the next principle we're working with is emphasizing independent, differentiated, and varied student work. We want, of course, to try to minimize as much as possible the need for parents or caretakers to support students' ability to complete assignments or have to rely on other students to collaborate, as different family circumstances will be differing widely due to work demands and illness. Assignments need to be differentiated wherever possible for students who might need additional support or extensions. Not all home learning may necessarily need to require the use of technology, so we'll also be exploring ways that we can reduce screen time where possible, because we know technology access is also a challenge for some folks, finding ways to promote learning at home that doesn't rely on technology where we can. Finally, we want to make sure that we're instituting accountability with both flexibility and grace. We are going to begin requiring assignments starting Monday and having those submitted by students in different ways, and then having educators provide feedback on those assignments that are submitted. We will be providing some level of grades with part of that feedback regarding what students accomplish. However, and this seems to be the consensus across what I'm seeing that other districts who are embarking upon this as we are, is that, and this is from the most recent guidance today, also from the Commissioner of Education for the state, is that overall grades for report cards beyond what's already been completed in schools, when we're looking ahead to the third trimester for our elementary and middle school students, and into potentially the third and fourth quarter for, hopefully not so much the fourth quarter, but for our high school students where grades are not already in place, we'll be looking at a pass-fail or a credit-no credit model. Because again, we know we have really varying circumstances for our different students' availability for learning depending on what's happening in their home and their family dynamic. The main focus is to engage students in learning, and we're really looking for parents to partner with us to help make that happen. If we're noticing that students are not engaging with what we're asking them to do, educators will be reaching out to families to try to make sure we're making those connections and see how we can help make that happen. These guiding principles, I think, are going to be very beneficial. A lot of these things are in place already in the work we've been doing the last couple of weeks, but we are going to be phasing into this more robust phase. And again, I ask for cooperation and patience because this will be messy from time to time. It's something we've never done before. But I have total confidence in the quality of our educators, in their dedication to their craft and to their students. And I have confidence in our parents and families that they're going to do the best they can to help our students learn during this unprecedented time when schools are closed and kids have to remain at home. So I'm looking forward to this next phase, hoping that we're back to school when the closure ends on May 4th. In the meantime, I certainly ask that first and foremost that you're safe. We ask that our students and families continue to practice social distancing to help keep the most vulnerable in our community safe during this pandemic. I do know, as I've tried to articulate, that I have the utmost confidence in this community. I am incredibly proud to be a resident of Shrewsbury, to have the privilege of being your superintendent, and I'm confident that we'll get through this difficult time together. We all take enormous pride in the quality of the education our students receive, and whether it's continuing their education over the coming weeks during this closure to the best extent we possibly can. That is something that we want to do. We're going to try to make sure that the students who are most vulnerable get everything we possibly can provide to them within the restrictions that we face. And we're hoping that all of our students benefit from the work that we're doing going forward. We will be communicating in more detail in the coming days and weeks as we go through this together. And again, I ask for your cooperation and support as we collaborate to help make this situation as good as it can possibly be for our students, because they're our primary concern, of course. I'll continue to be in touch with more communications as we go through this. And again, I thank you for your ongoing support and appreciate our families, our students, and our educators. I could not be more proud to be the superintendent of the Shrewsbury Public Schools. Thank you very much. Good evening, and please stay safe and healthy.